Welcome back to another episode of Exposing D&D 5e Monster Challenge Ratings with Andrew. And if you're watching this and you're enjoying what I'm doing, I would really appreciate a like on the video. That would be super awesome and would help out my channel immensely. Now with that out of the way, let's take a look at the adult silver dragon that I have here on the screen. Once again, we're going to fully expose this adult silver dragon to see how much of a challenge rating shift we may actually get. So first off, we're going to start with looking at how to use the adult silver dragon in your encounters. Now, as it shows here, this is a challenge rating 16. Now, I like to use Xanathar's Guide for encounter building, and if we look at the chart here for solo monsters, or as I like to call it, epic encounters, we'll see that we can start using a CR 16 with 4 characters at 13th level, 5 characters at 12th level, and technically we could probably throw this against 6 characters from somewhere around 11 to 12th, or on an average of 11.5 levels. After that, if we had more characters, we could probably go down the line and say if we had 7 characters, probably 11th level, and if we had 3 characters, then we could probably put this adult silver dragon up against them at level 14. Next, we can also look at the dragon with groups of monsters and go from there as well. Now we're going to skip down to the last chart here, because this is the only time CR16 actually shows up. And we can actually put 6 players up against one of these dragons at 16th level, 5 players at 17th and 18th level, and 4 players at 19th and 20th level. Now, your experiences as a DM, GM may vary depending on how much equipment and gear your players actually have. Beyond that, you could probably either start this a little sooner, or because the fact that, most teams have anywhere on average between 3 to 5 players, so 4 on average, you're not really going to see this with too many other monsters, unless you know that your players are really well equipped to handle an adult silver dragon plus a couple other monsters. You're probably not going to be adding in other things as well, unless the silver dragon is actually helping the players out. Then it's probably there to help balance out the encounters. Like maybe you're fighting something like Tiamat or a Tarask or something. You may not be fighting this silver dragon with other monsters. Now, with that out of the way, let's take a more focused look at our adult silver dragon and go through all of its little ins and outs to determine if this actually is a CR16 or not. So I start with the armor class and add that into my tool here for calculating the monster's actual CR. Now we have a huge dragon here, which only really matters for the effects of the hit point and the hit dice. Now this has 18 hit dice at D12, and the constitution of 25 will give it an additional 126 hit points, totaling us out to 243 hit points. Now right off the bat, we're going to see that 243 hit points unmodified is going to rate us at an DCR 12, expecting an AC 17. We already know that our dragon has an AC 19 base, which is going to bump it up to an OCR 13. But we haven't looked at everything else that this dragon has, so we don't really know what else to expect at the moment. So now that we have all of the base stats out of the way for its defenses, we can skip over the stats because we don't really care about that. So looking at the skills area, we have 4 saves: Dex, Constitution, Wisdom, and Charisma. So we're going to come over here to where it says saving throws and update that from 0 to 2 to 3 to 4, which gives our dragon an effective +2 AC bonus. Also, our dragon has skills. Doesn't matter, we're not going to worry about that. Does have damage immunities to cold, but because there's only one effect here, we're not going to take that into consideration. It really seems as though D&D only checks this in the box if there are 3 or more factors to consider. Since we only have cold and no more damage immunities, we're going to skip over that. If for some reason it seems that the dragon is overrated, then we might come back in and put that in place, but I really don't believe we're going to need it. Next, we also have senses, don't care. Languages, again, we don't care. And the challenge rating of an expected CR16. This is helpful in case the dragon can cause fear effects, but because it's a CR16, fear isn't going to really make much of a difference, but we will see a difference here with legendary resistance, so that's why we need the expected CR filled in. And because of that, we are in the trait section now, we're going to look at the legendary resistance here of 3 per day and add that into my tool. So we come down here to legendary resistance and update that to 3, giving us an additional 90 effective hit points, bumping us up from 243 to 333. Already, we're seeing a shift in the dragon's defensive CR, which was originally somewhere lower, I don't recall already, and now we're at a DCR of 18, and because of its effective AC bonus of 21, we are now at an actual DCR of 19. This could also still be modified because of legendary actions or some of its other actions that it could have, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Now that we've looked at the skills and traits section in these 2 areas here, let's move down into the actions and see what we have. And first off, we have a multi-attack. The dragon can use its Frightful Presence, as well as make 3 attacks, 1 with its bite and 2 with its claws. Now, I'm going to add in Frightful Presence here, but it's not going to add any hit points as I stated before because of the high CR that we're expected to have. And sure enough, we have +0 effective hit points in the bonus column here. Now, this does nothing and actually is really important for monsters CR 10 and below. That's where they're going to get the extra 25% hit points in case they are able to scare the players. And that's mainly because players post level 10 have really easy ways of handling fear. So back to the actions. We have a bite attack, which is dealing 19 piercing damage and an even number of dice rolls, so it's going to be an even 19, well, it's going to be a flat 19 points of damage for bite. And followed up with claw, we have 15 damage with an even amount of dice rolls. And then tail. Tail does 17 points of damage coming from an even amount of dice rolls. And if you're wondering why it keeps saying an even amount of dice rolls, if we had 3d8 for the damage of the tail, then I would add in a 0.5 at the end of the damage because our actual damage of, for example, 1d8 is half the die plus half of a damage. So a 1d8 equals 4.5 technically. And then we have Frightful Presence here, which doesn't do any damage, but we did take into account because of the trait for Frightful Presence and being able to fear the players. It could land and we could scare the players for probably 1 round, but generally speaking, they're going to have something that is going to allow them to counteract that fear and get right back into battle. So let's see what else our dragon has to offer here. Well, sure enough, our dragon actually has 2 types of breath weapons, Cold Breath and a Paralyzing Breath. Now, I am almost 100% certain that when D&D is calculating monster CRs, they are only looking at things that do damage, and especially doing damage in the first 3 rounds of combat. And I'm going to skip over Paralyzing Breath because it doesn't do any damage. Sure, it paralyzes players and can knock them out of combat for 1 or more rounds, but because it's not dealing damage, we're going to only take a look at the Cold Breath. And on average, our Cold Breath is going to do 58.5 damage because we have an odd number of d8 here coming from 13. So because the Cold Breath is an AoE and is a 60-foot cone, we're expecting to only get 2 monsters minimum, or players, in the attack. So when we do that, we actually have to multiply the total of 58.5 times 2 total targets, resulting in 117 cold damage on failed saves. So now that we have all of these main attacks taken care of, let's take a look at the multi-attack again and combine all those actions to see what we have. Alright, so our multi-attack is going to be 1 bite and 2 claws. Well, the bite is 19 points of damage and the claws are 15 points of damage each, giving us a total of 49 points of damage for its multi-attack, which is excellent. Alright, and the last thing that our dragon has is change shape in its action section. Now, we don't really care about change shape, it's not going to help us in battle. It does help the dragon get around for more social interactions and role-playing scenarios, but because of that, we don't really care about it. It's not going to help us figure out the CR for our dragon. So now let's look at the legendary actions. And the first thing our dragon can do as a legendary action is detect. It makes a wisdom perception check, and that's it. So we're going to skip over legendary action number 1 and move down to the tail attack. Alright, cool. Our dragon can do a tail attack for 17 points of damage, which only costs it 1 action, and can do it up to 3 times. So in theory, I'm going to take the 17 damage and multiply it by 3 to give us a total of 51 points of damage for our dragon's attack. And for its last legendary action, we have Wing Attack, which costs 2 actions. Our dragon can target creatures up to 10 feet away and have them do a dex save. If they fail, they're going to take 15 points of damage, and we target 2. So that's going to be a total of 30 points of damage. But because it's only 2 actions, we still have 1 action left over, so in theory, our dragon may do a tail attack first before going and flying away, or just getting into the air. So we can add in a tail attack as well, giving us a total of 47 points of damage for the wing attack and the tail attack. Now the funny part is, we're only a few points of damage off from 3 tail attacks, or 1 wing attack and 1 tail attack. The reduction is a total of 4 points of damage, but this could be really important depending on where our OCR is going to fall in the chart, because if you're looking at the chart here, the red section is the OCR and hasn't shifted yet. So now that we have our legendary actions all set, what can our dragon do for its first round of combat? Well, first round of combat, I would use the Cold Breath right away. Because it recharges on a 5 or 6, we have a chance of only seeing this once every 3 rounds of combat because of that 33% chance to recharge. So for round 1, we're going to take the Cold Breath attack, and we're also going to add in the 3 tail attacks, giving us a total of 168 points of damage for round 1 because of the breath and 3 tail attacks. And now in theory, because our breath weapon only recharges on a roll of 5 or 6, we won't see this breath weapon again for another potentially 3 rounds. On the 4th round of combat, we would probably see it again. So what are we doing here for damage? Well, simply we're going to take the multi-attack and add in the 3 tail attacks, netting us a total of 100 points of damage. And then finally for round 3, we're just going to copy round 2 and do the multi-attack plus the tail attack again. So we're going to have round 1, 168 points of damage. Round 2 and round 3, we're going to see 100 points of damage each. And when we do our full attack, we're looking at 122 points of average damage. And we are now looking at 122 points of damage, which is the maximum range for an OCR 19. But here's the thing, I haven't added in the saves or the attack bonus yet, and because we're doing so many attacks, I'm not going to use the DC from the Cold Breath attack and rather just use the bonuses for the attack, which is plus 13 attack bonus. So let's come back over here to the offensive section and change the 3 to a 13 and watch the dark red box right here jump dramatically. So it went from 16, I believe it was, it went to an OCR 20. Coupled with the DCR of 19, we are now looking at an actual CR of a 20 for our adult silver dragon. This is supposed to be a 16. I found a 20. Our DCR is a 19. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is a 19 for our adult silver dragon. The attacks, on the other hand, have dramatically jumped it up to an OCR of 20. We get the challenge rating of a 20 by adding in the DCR of 19 plus the OCR of 20, which equals 39. Averaged out, we're going to see 19.5. Rounding up, that's going to be a CR 20. So what in the world might be going on here? Well, more than likely, the breath weapon is partly to blame here. So let's change our breath weapon from round 1 to just straight up multi-attacks and change that to 100. So now we have an average of 100 points of damage for each round of combat. Once again, the final CR has only shifted a little bit, and we've gone from a CR 20 to a CR 19 now. Still, we haven't met the actual number of 16 like that was intended. Alright, so what's going on here? We have 100 points of damage, and still our adult silver dragon is 3 steps higher than it should be because of the printed CR 16. Well, let's take a look at the multi-attack. We're looking at 1 bite and 2 claws. What if we were to reduce that to 1 bite and 1 claw instead? Let's see what happens here. Well, now we have a full attack of only 85 points of damage, and still we're higher than the printed value. We're actually at a CR of 17. There's really not much more we can do here except for modifying the amount of damage that our adult silver dragon is doing. I don't want to say don't use the breath weapon like I've done in the past for quick fixes. I still want to see this breath weapon in place. I still want to see its full combination of attacks and what have you. So my recommendation is just label this a CR 20. That's all there is to it. The adult silver dragon is a CR 20. It's not a 16. There's no easy way to bring this back down without heavily modifying the adult silver dragon, which is very unfortunate. And as far as I'm concerned, this adult silver dragon is a CR 20. If we go back to the encounter building, at our 20, we're now looking at anywhere between 17th and 18th level for a party of 4, 16th level for a party of 5, and 15th level for a party of 6 players. This definitely increases the range from what we had once before of 11th and 12th. I am fairly certain you would see a TPK if your party actually had to fight an adult silver dragon at these recommended levels. So some of the other things we could look at is modifying our dragon. Honestly, modifying the dragon is only going to make it stronger. So for instance, if we were to add magic resistance, surprisingly enough, it's not really going to modify the CR 20 just yet. So if we were to add in magic resistance, we're going to get a +2 AC bonus. Coupled with the saving throw bonus, our AC goes from a 19 to a 23, and this increases it from a 19 to a 20. So with magic resistance, we have an even 20 across the board adult silver dragon. If we keep adding stuff to our monster, this makes the monster more complex, more things to remember, and increases the CR even further, making this an even deadlier dragon to deal with. And we haven't even looked at the ancient silver dragon yet to see how rough that one is. I mean, the more we add, the more likely we're just going to have an ancient silver dragon. So if that's what you want, you might as well go and use that instead. So I wouldn't really modify the adult silver dragon any further than it already is. The only other thing I might throw on there is the magic resistance, just because it doesn't really change the CR at all. Thank you for joining me again as we exposed another monster from D&D 5th edition and took a look at its actual challenge rating. Join me again next week as we take a look at another monster and see what is going on with these challenge ratings.